Hello, my name is Erica Smith. Today's date is Saturday, March 23rd, 2019. I am interviewing Eric Davenport on Ball State campus as part of the Ball State University Honors College Oral History Project. Thank you, Eric, for agreeing to participate in this effort, which we are conducting during the Honors College's 60th anniversary year.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
I would like to begin by gaining a greater understanding of your upbringing. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Albany, New York, 1978, in the wee hours of the morning, I think.
In the wee hours. How would you describe your family experience growing up?
It was great. I had really caring and engaged parents. Grew up in the countryside surrounding Albany for the first 6 years of my life, and then also in the suburbs. When I was 5.5 or 6 or so, I moved to the suburbs. So that I remember that first country experience pretty well. We had a barn in the back next to the house. Quintessential red barn. Used to play in the hayloft a lot. Amazing amounts of time outside in the woods and the fields. And then in the suburbs, similarly, like playing in the stream behind the house and in the woods. And going to school there was also somewhat transformative, in my career choices, which was pretty amazing.
That's awesome. Did you have any siblings growing up?
Yep, one of each.
One of each?
A younger sister and a younger brother.
All right. And then what was it like with your experiences with them? I know you mentioned playing in the hayloft and in the countryside.
Yeah, were, most of our time together was in the suburbs, and they, I don't even know where to start. I mean, it was a long time ago, and they were just really wonderful people to be around. And I look back on that life, and it seems so long ago, but there were definitely a lot of times that we spent either on trips together or just like struggling through homework together, or playing games out in the yard. And we had similar friends and a lot of family friends, and then those times really were invaluable, since they built a foundation, since we still spend time together even as adults. So to have had those experiences together has been, it's kind of a treasure. The more I think about it, I haven't thought about that in a long time since you just asked that question. So I think I'm going to revisit that later too, in my own time, and trying to explore it a little bit.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had transitioned from the countryside to the suburbs. What was that transition like for you and your siblings?
I think my younger sister was born there in the countryside. My younger brother, I honestly can't remember if he was. I think he was as well, but was like super young if we had transitioned. So even for me, I don't even remember the transition very much. I remember running up and down like a front walk in the new house that we moved into in the suburbs. I remember first grade being a particularly tough struggle for me, just because the amount of workload and expectations changed instantly. It was harder. I was definitely, the new kid on the block, but was in a community where there were other families, so to make friends in the neighborhood was fairly easy to do, even though I would say socially inept. So despite that, I still had quite the crowd to relate to and play with, and again, like struggle through all the homework, and then be on sports teams together with, and so it was definitely some really good opportunities.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And you had started to mention your first grade year. Can you elaborate a little bit more on your education as you were growing up?
Yeah, in elementary school, that I remember pieces of elementary school that were social struggles. You know, I think it's interesting to look at the impact of, or I guess the recognition that our societal circles have today about bullying and its effect on students. I was definitely one of the kids that were bullied going through elementary school, and you know, I was an easy target, and but it was just kind of, it was kind of accepted as normal there at that time, you know, and probably not even as much or as harmful or disastrous as it was for the previous generations of like when my parents went to school, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you know, some of those instances definitely stick out in my mind as part of the challenges, but there are plenty of good things too, and I think that I can look back on it now and realize the positive impacts of early education in the opportunities that I had, which are not typical in other areas of the country, I think, or the world, right? Like I've traveled in other countries and lived in other countries and parts of the United States and realized that upstate New York has really good school systems, you know, and people, you know, the staff and the caliber of education, I think, is definitely something that people recognize in the Northeast as something that is a little bit different and a little bit, you know, they value it. And I look back on it and I can see why, because growing up I did learn quite a bit and had opportunities even outside of the education, like and outside of the core, like math, English, social studies stuff, you know, there were opportunities that schools offered that I don't think other places would have. I know they didn't have the same offerings. I'm trying to think of an example. You know, there's, you know, sports teams, of course, is like one of the things that is kind of always there. But there were different community groups that supplemented elementary school education for me, like Boy Scouts, right, and like youth groups at church, and so there was a lot of time that I had spent doing service projects and volunteer projects that allowed me, even though I was like straight up white suburban kid growing up in a privileged area, that I had the opportunity to go and be part of different communities throughout that process. You know, it's interesting to look back on that now and the work that I've taken on as a career choice, and draw parallels between those early experiences and what I feel like doing now with my time and what I'm passionate about.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a lot of different opportunities and experiences that you got while you were in the education system in New York that aren't necessarily available to other areas. Do you think that this benefited you and carried on and piqued your interest in other areas as you continued through middle and high school?
Yeah, high school in particular. Middle school was mostly, I think, just, you know, a ton of physical activity. And I think high school was a continuation of that. I mean, I remember my years in high school were easy academically. Like it wasn't very challenging. But I did challenge myself physically. Like I was not built as an athlete, even though I like it, and I like playing quite a bit, anything, sports really is. And I remember getting done with my high school days and then going to track practice from 4 to 6, and then baseball practice from 6 to 8, and then volleyball practice from 8 to 10. like on the same day, and then going home and eating a 10-pack of tacos to go from Taco Bell while I did 4 hours of physics homework and go to bed at 2 in the morning. You know, like it was pretty intense in high school. And then, but specifically the curriculum there was very different than other schools, even in the surrounding area where we were. I went to Clifton Park. Shenendehowa's school system there has a track choice, or it did when I went to school, and I know they've kept it, but it's probably evolved. But they, you know, in ninth grade, you choose. You go in the music track, or you go into a design track, or a studio art track, or kind of a more hands-on, like let's build some stuff. And I'm an architect now because I chose the design track. And in ninth grade, it was, you know, drafting, which was not very. I know that wasn't a very efficient way to learn design, like with T-squares and triangles. It just doesn't work well. But to have the exposure, you know, to that process of being given problems and then having to come up with solutions through engineering and design processes was really neat, and exposure to environmentalism. You know, we had a lot of projects based in the solar field, so we built solar ovens and thermal siphoning units and solar cars, you know, and we had a lot of also engineering projects based around accessibility, you know, people with disabilities that needed specific tools and helps and needs. And then we also had straight up architecture, you know, as a senior in high school. Architecture was that last culmination of the design classes, which is the main reason why I became an architect today. And I remember that very well. My teacher, Mr. Nelson, brought in the class, he brought in blueprints of the egg structure in Albany. I don't know if you know the Empire State Plaza at all, but there's this, one of the buildings in the plaza is literally shaped like the bottom portion of an egg, and it's all precast concrete, or it's cast in place concrete, and then is, you know, supported by a single pedestal, and it's an auditorium inside. And he brought in the drawings for the wooden formwork that the concrete was poured into, and they have to be, you know, seriously engineered in order to take the weight of all that concrete that holds up this, you know, huge, you know, tons and tons and tons of mass in this beautifully sculpted form. And those drawings were probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And
That's awesome.
yeah, and I was just blown away. I was like, what is this? And he went in to describe like the process and what it was like to be an engineer, and you know, architects are on the team, and he talked about architecture in terms of what we were doing with our own exercises. And I didn't even know what an architect was, you know, and he explained it. It was like, yeah, you design buildings. I was like, oh, like, yeah, somebody has to think about these, you know, structures that we inhabit. He's like, yeah, you go to school and become an architect. And I was like, you can go to school for this? And he actually pointed me to Ball State as an option. I spoke with my guidance counselor after that during my college searches, and, you know, Ball State was on the list, and that's probably the primary reason why I'm here, just because of my high school teachers' guidance.
That is awesome. And what was the name of your high school, and what years did you attend?
It's Shenendehowa, and I mean, they're a central school system, so there were many. There was one central high school, and I'm trying to remember the years that I attended. High school was from 92 to 96. Yeah, I graduated in 96, and then from there came to Ball State, where I graduated from here in 2001.
Okay. You also mentioned that there were multiple tracks that you could have gone through while you were in high school.
Yep.
What drew you to design?
Because I could draw. You know, I would get up on Saturday mornings, and I think most kids would watch cartoons, and I would get up before anyone else was up in my family. Actually, my dad, I think, got up early too. But there were actually drawing shows Saturday mornings. I remember sitting on the couch when it was around the age of 6 to 8, and just drawing, following along and drawing them. They were geared towards kids, or they were professional painters, or there were many options, and I just practiced, just because I liked it, and kept on drawing through elementary school, middle school, and high school. And my teacher that I mentioned that taught that design track in high school kind of, he singled me out from the rest of the class because I could draw. And this is with a caveat. I mean, I would say that architects are great designers, but not because they can draw. There are tons and many architects better than I can that can't draw anything. But being able to communicate visually some ideas through that skill was something that my teacher, Mr. Nelson, recognized and gave me other assignments, outside of the class to continue working on. I think the solar car was like one of those, but and other buildings, the design. He had a student go through his class before I did, who was who did graduate from Ball State. That's how he knew about the college. And I wish I could remember her name, I do not, but she got a Fulbright scholarship, I think, during her time here, and then went and did that study in South America somewhere. And she had still kept up correspondence with Mr. Nelson. That's how he knew about Ball State and the fact that they offered like an architecture program, because she had gone through it. So he sent me to the library to check out books by Antonio Gaudí, who's an architect in Spain, and that was kind of the linchpin that kind of closed the deal. I was like, okay, yes, this is what I'm going to do.
That's awesome. You had mentioned your parents and how they had kind of influenced your upbringing and a lot of what you have done. Mm-hmm. May I ask their name and their occupation?
Sure. My father, Fran Davenport, he is a chemical engineer, and he worked for Albany International. They design and develop felt products that go on huge paper pressing machines. And he's been with them for a long, long time, recently retired. His engineering background was probably it had a huge influence on my choices too, and he was steering me towards like that design, world, just by steering is the wrong word. I think he did it, right? And so I saw that, right? And then that was the influence. And I remember he did send me to a design engineering camp at MIT for one summer, and that was, that was strictly engineering. And it was great that he did, because I hated it. It was pretty tough, and just not my thing. It was less design of physical stuff and more kind of problem solving that was a little bit more math and physics oriented. And my brain just isn't wired that way. And it was good to find that out, and so by the end of it, that was another good sign, telling sign of what direction I should head in. My mom is an amazing teacher, and she probably wouldn't call herself that. She works in church ministries, and she before then was a registered nurse. So she had a couple of very strong career paths, and through her example, and open doors and opportunities through her community circles, I think is where I've experienced a lot of different demographics and networks of people and opportunities for like the service projects that I mentioned before, which got me into understanding that, the world has issues. Like, there are problems to solve, not just what our teachers were giving us in high school as like design exercises. Like, there are some serious issues that people suffer through that are based or because of social ills, or because of physical design scenarios, or because of zoning laws and regulations, and how those laws are impacted by racial divides. And complex, they're really, really complex, especially for somebody in high school to wrap their heads around and even really appreciate. And so again, it's one of those things like I look back on and can obviously appreciate them more now. And during the time, it was kind of along for the ride, and just being exposed to these things, so I at least knew about them.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that was more about what my mom, I think offered, rather than her career choices. But
no, that's wonderful, everything that she did. She sounds like a very, very impactful woman.
yeah, in many people's lives.
And with her role in the church and in the church ministries and your involvement in church, what was that like growing up?
Oh, I hated it. It was forced, it was expected, and of course, railed against because it was so boring. Going to mass, it was just something it was like that an awful feeling in the pit of my stomach, right, when Sunday morning would roll around. It was just so much resistance went into that, and it was really tough. I think in high school, I really had to get a lot of gumption to tell my parents I just didn't want to do it anymore, and I had gone through the whole Catholic, what's the word? Sacraments, I think, right? Where, I was like in the church, and after that, it was just like I just turned away from it, especially after I had experienced other things in the world where organized religion had actually caused like a lot of human strife and suffering and divide. And it's interesting because recently, in the last couple of years, I've gotten back into organized religion in the form of Universalist Unitarian communities, and they have a very, very strong social justice mindset, and it's not faith-based in the terms of, like, it's not a defined dogma. It's a very open, like, whatever your beliefs are kind of thinking. That, but here's like a system and a community where we're taking action and promoting these tenets that really, really resonated with me because of those early years in church. Like, they're very similar tenets, like the surrounding, like, this is how to be a good human, and which I think, the organized religion dogmas are really about that core, right? And so you kind of got rid of all the other stuff that defined what a religion was, and just really focused on those core issues that I had gained growing up.
Okay. And then did you continue to have that strife and kind of like dread towards going to church all through middle school and high school as well?
Yep.
As you attended?
Yep, as I attended, and even now, when I go to a UU Mass, and I'm 41, and I was back, I'd stopped going to church as a Catholic probably when I was 17 or 18, and the services are structured like a Catholic Mass, and it still gives me the heebie-jeebies. But it's totally worth it. It's okay.
And you had mentioned that in high school, Mr. Nelson, your teacher, had steered you towards Ball State.
Mm-hmm.
Were you looking at any other colleges at the time as well?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what they were. New Jersey Institute of Technology and their program, Cornell, RPI. I want to say Columbia, but I don't think I think I was, because they were in New York City, that was like I checked that off, I crossed that off the list for some reason. There was one more and I can't remember what it was.
Okay. And coming from Albany, New York, and having all of these options and coming from such a prestigious high-level high school, what was it that drew you specifically to Ball State of all of your other options? Was it your professor or your teacher, or was there something about Ball State that you had seen that you had liked?
It was the Whitinger Scholarship. You know, they gave me a free ride, and it was an easy choice. Before then, it was still in the top two, though, and I think it was because of the work that the architecture studios went through, like their types of projects. And I didn't really have many interactions with staff or professors. And I should have, you know, and like even when my kids right now, when they go to school and choose, and we're making choices for them about their education, I don't care where it is, what type of building it is, what projects they are, what the curriculum is, what they're learning, like all that stuff doesn't matter. It's like the caliber of the professors and the staff, like well, you know, in their case, the teachers, you know, like that is by far like the most important factor in what you get out of an educational process. It's the people that are there as part of the system. And my experience with Ball State when making the decisions, what I think was most intense when I was going through the Whitinger application process. So I had to come back after my first visit and go through an interview, and also like write a spontaneous essay. And those interactions were great. And because of my high school experiences, I had a lot to talk to. I mean, in high school, I had a piece of work that I developed as an 11th grader hanging in the Goddard Space Station because it was from our design class that I don't remember what the exercise was, but I remember the piece, like it was about interstellar mining of minerals from you know, meteors or floating space elements, and how those fed like human habitat on different planets, you know, and being able to depict that as like the future. And I had just entered a Lego contest and designed something that had to do with electromagnetic levitation of structures and Legos and how they like were combined together. You know, I had like all this stuff that I had done in high school as part of that experience to bring to the table when talking to people about what I wanted out of life in a college experience, and having a continuation of that creativity or those opportunities to be creative and problem solve with visual arts as the tools to communicate solutions was really exciting, you know, really exciting. And it's so interesting how life happens, because that excitement kind of went away when I got married, had a kid, bought a house, cut my dreadlocks, got a real job in the span of like 4 months after traveling the world. And then I focused on laundry and cooking and paying the bills. And literally, I was talking about this earlier today about some of my, with some of my professors or former professors, and being back here really brings back some of that initial excitement again. You know, like I don't build models now in my architecture practice, but I absolutely should. And there are things in that creative zone and process that were so exciting that brought me here, and I was able to develop that, went away. And now coming back here and coming and doing this interview and kind of reliving a little bit of those past experiences and remembering what that was like I'm experiencing that right now, you know, that critical transformation of like, oh my gosh, like this is really what it was about. And it did go away, but it's time to, let's bring that back again. Let's get it into my life again.
Yeah. You seem like you light up when you talk about a lot of your projects that you have done regarding architecture and design. Can you talk a little bit about the ones that you did before you came to Ball State that you had talked about during your Weidinger scholarship interview?
Yeah, there was one that in particular that was really neat. It was the problem that our high school teacher gave us was to design a base camp for Antarctica scientists. And it had to fit into the back end of a DC-10 plane, right? Because that's how all the supplies are delivered there. So we had to figure out how to design a compact shelter and a power source and food supplies that would last until the next delivery. So there were a lot of moving parts, right, in order to maintain human habitat in a really harsh environment with specific programming. Because there's equipment, right? What are they going to be studying there? What do they need as a laboratory for that first trip? And this is big, it's not like there's a base camp there already, like there is today. This is like there's a sheet of ice and lots of wind and snow and hardly any light for most of the year. So how do you do that with solar panels? You don't, right? You use wind turbines, and land wind-based turbines suck at generating power. And this stuff has to fit in the back of a plane and support how many people, like living together for how many months? Like, so all these problems for a high school kid to wrap their head around. And it was interesting because they did it individually. It's not like we worked together in groups in this. It was like you as one person are going to design all this stuff and get it to work. And if I had the chance, I would go back and do that one again and again. I think a couple times, because there was so many complexities that really needed attention and thoughtfulness from so many different areas of discipline, from science, the science biology part to the aeronautics part, the energy design, the human shelter aspects of it were all like, how do you fit all those together into the back of a plane? It was really, really interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, and people do that for real. It's cool.
That is awesome. That's a really cool project.
Yeah.
And with projects like that kind of develop and promote that critical thinking and those out-of-the-box methods, how did that impact your experience going through that Weidinger scholarship interview and all of the processes that followed? Like, did it help you kind of be a little bit better prepared, or?
Yeah, I think that I was able to be fluid in my thought process, right? So when I was presented with a problem to solve in the interview and given like a spontaneous essay, like it was easy. It was second nature by that point as a high school student to be able to come up with solutions when presented with the problems, and because I had at least the basic knowledge of a creative process. And then here at Ball State, as an architecture student, that creative process was really developed, right? That's what the architecture school really focuses on. It's like, all right, what is the process in order to come up with solutions? Because you're not going to just sit down and like figure it out in like a half an hour. Like, there needs to be an organization of thought process, a way to communicate, a way to develop the different steps of understanding what the problem even is, right? And then coming up with a solution and options, within those solutions to explore, turn it upside down, pull it inside out, look at it sideways, have put it down, walk away, come back to it. Solutions come about because you use different materials. Solutions come about because you do use different media to communicate them. They change based on who you're talking to about them. They change on who they involve. And having a process to really gather, organize, communicate, and ultimately build something that offers a solution to a real problem is really difficult. you know? And to get it right it never happens. Like, you never get it right. But it's about having a solution that feels like it's the right thing to do. And now that there's a process for it, I can carry that forward in my professional career as an architect and come up with solutions that feel like the right direction for my clients. And that is the most gratifying thing that I got out of Ball State, and what I do with my profession today.
That is awesome. So you attended Ball State from 1996 to 2001, and you were in the 5-year architecture program, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What did that transition your first year from Albany, New York to Muncie, Indiana look like for you?
It was culture shock. Coming to the Bible Belt, the heart of America, the breadbasket, right, was all really weird. Students would disappear for harvest weekend, and I would be like the only one here. You know, the different I had just given up, right, on going to church, and there were a lot of people here that were, you know, very, very religious. I was not. I was railing against it. There were I think activity-wise, I remember not having the same level of activities offered. Like where I was from, it was, you know, even though it was the suburbs, the weekends were just packed full of stuff to do, and then coming here, it just wasn't the same level of opportunities. And I think as I grew into the college life here, though, you know, that obviously changed. You know, more and more opportunities that were there, you know, I found out about, and created some of my own, which were great. And just in the sheer fact alone that it's a university campus, and there's so many different people from different backgrounds, offered something that I didn't get, right, in the suburbs of Albany. So that was really a treat. And is it okay if I go back or beyond my first year? You know, Muncie is very interesting. Ball State itself is very interesting, but Muncie as a town, I came to find kind of a subculture of people that I became very close with. You know, Muncie is where I learned transcendental meditation and yoga, and I learned to play capoeira, and I had studied mixed martial arts in high school and continued that out here in different forms. And then it's also where I learned, Muncie is also where I learned Reiki and about Ayurvedic medicine. You know, and so there was this like incredible like complement to what I was learning about as, you know, becoming an architect in architecture school, and what it meant to be human, you know, really, because architecture is really about people, it's not about buildings. And having this complement of all these healing arts or ways of life that are not your traditional Western way of doing things, taught to me by people in the Bible Belt, the breadbasket, the heart of America, that you would never think would live here, and they've made their lives here in the middle of that, what most of the country assumes as kind of like your typical American Midwestern town. That's not what it is at all.
Muncie, Indiana, and Ball State in particular, it's often referred to as an island community, as in most students from Ball State typically stay in the Ball State area and don't go out into the greater region. How did you go out and discover all of these different elements in this different subculture within Muncie? What prompted you to really go out and discover that?
I think it was meditation at first. Is it Dr. Wolf, I think, is a music professor here, and he actually taught a form of meditation, and it was, I think there was a doorway there, and then at least there was some skill building there, and then living off campus was a big deal. I lived in the dorms for the first year and a half, maybe 2 years, and then third, fourth, fifth years were off campus. And just by nature of being away from the campus and literally living in the community was another doorway. And I don't feel like I went and searched for those things at all. They definitely found me. I remember people, I remember Anna Peterson and the Peterson family. Her father is an Ayurvedic doc and family practitioner here in town. And I remember her crew and circles quickly enveloped me as somebody that was open to what they thought, or what they did as like their normal life, which was practice capoeira, and like Reiki was normal, and there were these really neat ways of being human, right? Doing human in a very positive, healing, helpful to others and self kind of system, and it was refreshing. And then bringing that stuff back to New York was really great. I mean, capoeira is like one of the reasons that I'm married to an amazing woman right now, and be able to continue a meditation practice still to this day that helps my creative drive and promotes positive thinking, allow us 20 minutes of a dive into a well of happiness, that isn't found anywhere else, is really invaluable.
That's awesome. And how did this experience impact your experience at Ball State?
I think it got me through a lot of the struggles. I mean, the architecture program is not easy. I didn't sleep much. Meditation is not a replacement for sleep, which is what I was taught, and I used it for a replacement for sleep. If I had to do it over again, I would never do that. I think it took years off my life. But the creative aspects, right, that I got really excited about and am excited about were only enhanced by these things and complemented, and it was a huge release and relief, like having hours and hours hunched over a desk, building models and drawings and really working with your hands and mind so much, and then being able to like go and blow off for an hour doing like hard physical exercise, which is what capoeira really is. Like, that is intense. Like those two things complemented and balanced my like intense creative work and gave me the physical outlet that I really needed to still be a human being.
I know with the architecture program, it's typically a very high-stress environment.
Mm-hmm.
Did capoeira and yoga and all of these meditations help relieve some of that tension for you with that physical outlet?
Yeah, absolutely. I have TMJ as well. It's a transmandibular joint syndrome, so I have a headache 24/7. Like, I have a headache right now. The stress of my life my body has learned to deal with that by clenching, jaw and facial muscles, and it's just a pain, literally. So yoga and meditation helps manage a lot of that. And unfortunately, what sets off the pain the most is lack of sleep. Lack of sleep, diet, and of course, emotional stresses, like really, really fire that up. And the physical aspects of capoeira, yoga, and then the meditation practice definitely help manage that stress. So yeah, TMJ is like really sucks, but it's also a barometer. Like I know immediately when I'm stressed out, and there are ways that I can go and de-stress, and now I have the tools to do that. So I think I can get those years that the lack of sleep took off my life. I think I can get them back.
Let's hope so. So you mentioned with TMJ that barometer sense of being able to tell when you're stressed. Was this something that you noticed while you were in college?
Oh yeah, and before. It started in high school.
Okay. And you had mentioned that you lived in the dorms for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Which dorm did you live in?
What's the one by the duck pond?
La Follette?
The other one. It's closer.
Johnson?
It might have been Johnson. I think it was Johnson. Johnson Hall. Okay. Let's say it was Johnson.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had moved into a house off campus.
Mm-hmm.
How far into the Muncie community were you?
It was just a couple blocks off campus.
Okay.
It wasn't downtown. Dill Street.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a carriage house on Dill Street, and then there was another. Yeah, it was probably 3 different locations, and then a 4th one during the summer semester when I was a Sparky. No. Yes. No, I can't remember. I can't remember. But I did a summer here where there was like 3 or 4 different locations.
Okay. And what did your involvement look like on campus?
So I would get up, go to studio before classes started, go to classes. Breakfast happened somewhere in there, and studio was kind of like took over, and I minored in studio art as well. So I had like the assignments in those classes were 40 hours a pop. So it was like having a full-time job and then doing like all the rest of the schooling as well. So it was, I think it was a little bit abnormally, overly academically busy. So I didn't have a lot of on-campus life. I kind of took time to be more involved in my 3rd, 4th, and 5th years. I did travel a lot during that time too, but I think I did things like play on the Ultimate Frisbee team, which was also another great release and wicked fun, even though I wasn't that good at it. And yeah, campus life. I mean, I would be watching the fireworks from the studio window. There wasn't on the 4th of July, and there wasn't a lot of involvement that I had outside of the academics. So, and that's one of the things I look back on. Had I the chance to do it over again, I don't think I would have minored in studio art. I think I would have like really focused on the architecture stuff, and then had more time to look at even other possibilities and other open doors that Ball State would have offered or did offer, and I probably didn't see. I was probably like too busy with my nose to the grindstone.
You had mentioned also that you were very athletically involved in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Did this continue on with all of that academic rigor while you were in college?
Not to the same extent. I think in high school it was like pretty much every day, and I think when I was here on campus, I took the opportunities when they could. It definitely wasn't every day, but it was certainly like capoeira sessions or yoga in the morning, or a mix of the two. It wasn't as scheduled, but it was certainly prevalent. And became more prevalent as my time here on campus extended over the years. So I took more time to do those kinds of things, like in my later years.
Is there a reason for that?
Because I think when I was first here, I was young and stupid and just like was out to prove myself instead of really taking care of myself. So I'd always, I had to be doing the best that I could, and I was here for that reason and that reason alone. And it was not a healthy way to look at it. And, it was literally painful, right? The TMJ would flare up, and but it was also like I was just exhausted all the time, and quickly, well, not quickly, it took me a couple of years to figure out like this is probably not the best way to go about it, and then started introducing those other activities and seeking them out, and having a management system and schedule and make sure that I could do it right.
And with that academic rigor with your architecture program and the studio arts program, what did your involvement with the Honors College look like as you went through?
It was really, it was really great. I'm trying to remember specifics. I know Barb Stedman's classes were transformative, and she taught, the Western world classes in literature, and the projects there and the writing exercises were amazing. I also think they really coupled the communication skills I was learning as an architecture student very, very well, because it's a lot of, writing is writing. It's not, grammar is one thing, but to be able to organize thoughts with grit and rigor the way that Dr. Stedman really pushed her students to be successful with a, and it takes grit and rigor to be critical and to really make sure that what you're communicating is accurate and thorough, but exciting and engaging. Like I can feel, I remember, I look back now and I remember what her classes felt like. I remember that feeling. And she had a system, like kind of a Socratic system of teaching, and wouldn't just give out answers. It wasn't lecture style at all, and it was discussion based. And I don't know if she knows she has a system, but whatever she was doing totally worked. And there would be like this process of, here's the issue, and this is really kind of what we want to get out of it. And then there would be like an open-ended pathway, right, to get what she really wanted us to understand as a class. And it would be, we'd like struggle and weave our way through that path. And I remember her like, we'd get to the end, it would culminate, and she'd like celebrate. It was like, yes, that was it. And I remember those feelings, like out of all the classes I took, I remember hers, like they were very emotive. There were other honors classes too, and I wish I had a list, because I think part of my experience of sleep deprivation has made me forget some of what those were. I remember there was a family systems class too, and maybe it was taught by Dr. Matt Ryan. There were other emotive classes, and I would say that was the biggest thing I think the honors college programs did for me as a student that set them apart from History 101, right? Like auditorium style with 150 students in it, or your typical math or science classes, even with a more normal teaching environment with 20 or 30 students and going through labs or whatever. They were never they were very different, right? The honors college classes they had this emotional base effect. Like they were very emotive. They had a lasting effect, and like I can remember them now, even 20 years later. That what I can remember what they felt like, and I remember their impact. Like that is a big deal.
Do you remember when you had first taken a course with Dr. Stedman, and what that course was by chance?
I don't. I do. Hold on. Western literature? Yeah, it was definitely, it was a Western literature class.
And did you take multiple classes with Dr.
Yes.
Stedman?
Yeah, over the years. Like there was a group of us that kind of stayed with her for probably 3 years, I think.
And did you notice that transformative experience in all of her classes?
I don't remember it not happening. I think, I think the overall impression, is that, and there were sessions that were hard. There were tests, of course. The reading was difficult. The writing was insane because of the grit that was demanded behind it.
With your background from your high school experience, did you think that the Honors College was still something that was challenging for you?
Could have been more challenging. I remember thinking that some of it was kind of like a continuation of high school. But I also didn't mind. I mean, there was enough rigor and stuff that I was taking on that it was really okay to still be getting material and education in a way that was not incredibly demanding. I mean, there's like to have that balance of like, hey, there are going to be a couple hard classes like in a 15 credit or an 18 credit over full schedule. I remember I was taking like 18 to 21 credits per semester. And I think, 15 credits happened a couple times too. And I remember the difference between them was because, there were really hard classes in particular on those lighter loads, lighter loaded semesters. And to have easier classes was kind of a gift.
Understandable. How would you compare those Honors College courses to your architecture and your studio arts courses?
They're very different, but complementary. Architecture courses are really about having faith in a process, in a creative process, and being able to communicate those ideas to problems, or communicate solutions to problems with visual graphics and skills. But the Honors College, really focused on how do you communicate those same things with speech and writing. And I don't think in architecture there's just not the emphasis or the time for that. And ironically, as a practicing architect today, I do a lot of speaking and a lot of writing. And organizing thoughts and having the Honors College classes that really focused on that type of communication was extremely beneficial. I mean, I help other people write and communicate, and from emails to applications to grants. There are organizations that I'm now involved with that need those same skills that I can, confidently make recommendations about and help them, further their missions. Like it's really impacting, like those Honors College classes really impact not just me personally, they're like allowing me to impact other groups of people out there in the world doing amazing things.
So would you say that those Honors College courses are something that you have learned skills from that still are a driving force in your life today?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay,
Yeah.
just making sure.
Yep. That's a good way to put it.
Thank you. All right, and then you had mentioned that you stopped going to religious activities when you were around 17 or 18.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever venture out into any church or religious group while you were at Ball State?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And you also had mentioned that growing up you had experienced some bullying, some social issues. How did that impact your collegiate experience as far as social groups go?
I was glad to get out of the high school environment for sure. You know, I was looking for college as an opportunity to redefine myself as a person and be stronger. I mean, that's the main reason why I did MMA fighting, was to be somebody else that could stand up to other people. And I think I did it. You know, I was able to just get out of my typical home environment and break out of the shell that I had created as a protective shield around me and become more of a person, because I wasn't in my familiar environment. You know, somewhere totally new people, new opportunities. And, you know, I was ready to take advantage of those things.
Okay. And within the architecture program and a lot of collegiate programs in general, a lot of people typically form groups with their classmates or people that they're around often. Did you do this while you were in college?
Of course, yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on your experience with that?
Yeah, I had a great group of friends that were, you know, a couple different college circles, roommates, other architecture students, and I'm so happy about this visit in particular, because I'm getting contact information from my professors about those people. So I'm actually going to visit one, you know, after this interview, which is really exciting, and reconnect with him and his family. But those relationships were varied. You know, there's the architecture community, which is really, I mean, they're really tight knit, because they spend so much time together and rarely leave the building, right? I am grateful, right, to have left the building, and I had other college groups in the literature, kind of English learning world, the studio art world, because that was my minor, and spent time with people there out of that, those classes. And I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, there's the sports, of course, like the Frisbee team was great. And then off-campus groups. You know, I really, really valued the community members that lived in Muncie that would, you know, we'd go and play capoeira somewhere, either on campus or off campus, you know. Yeah, it was varied. It was definitely varied.
And with your experience in both being in groups on campus and then having also those off-campus groups of friends and relations, did you ever try to get anyone that you were friends with on campus to venture out with you to those different areas of Muncie?
I think we did that by default. It wasn't an effort, and it happened, yeah.
Okay.
Like, it was like, hey, let's come go check this group out. They're playing like this show over in downtown, or sometimes we would spend time by the White River, you know, college, you know, Ball State friends and friends that had lived in Muncie doing, I don't know, just even hiking around, you know. So yeah, there was definitely intermingling. That was fairly effortless.
Did you notice other students doing the same thing? Was that a commonality?
I don't know.
Okay. And then you mentioned also that you're still in communication with professors and friends that you had met while you were in college.
Mm-hmm.
How have you kept those relationships going?
I have not kept them going very well. And I think that's one of my biggest failings right now. And I'm realizing that now too, because I definitely value those relationships immensely. And I'm really excited to rekindle them. You know, this visit has been giving me opportunities to do that. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. And are these professors that you're meeting with professors that you had in honors college or architecture programs?
Both.
Both.
Mhm.
Awesome. And through your honors college experience, you've had the opportunity to travel, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your travel opportunities that you've had?
I've had a few of them. I don't remember which ones were honors college and which ones were well, hold on, give me a second. So we had architecture travel programs, which I did, and I also did a travel program to the southwest of the United States, which is not an architecture travel program. It must have been an honors college program. But it was a few weeks during the summer, and we visited Navajo and Hopi communities, and that was amazing. Living with Americans that were living on reservations and had this deep sense of culture and what it meant to be Native American today, and then graciously sharing their struggles with us in terms of current politics and how, for example, like the Navajos dealing with coal companies, what does that mean for them and for the companies and the land that they are living on, that they call home? How do the Hopi practice their ancient ceremonies that we call ancient, that they call normal and today? And oh my God, the story there, that there was one time we went, it was a small group of students, and we went to a rain dance ceremony on one of the mesas in the Hopi reservations, and they had been dancing for the ceremony's long, and we had gotten there kind of in the middle. It's days and days and days of dancing and fasting, kind of like the Sundance ceremony in different traditions. But they're, the Hopis have a rain dance, and they call the rain, right? And if it doesn't come, like it's a problem out in the desert. And serious issues ensued from disease and starvation, and they dance for hours and days and fast in preparation for what they hope are the rains coming. And sometimes it doesn't happen, and sometimes it does. And I remember watching that ceremony stuck with me, because you can see it. You can see like the severity of it. Like, how are we going to feed our children if this doesn't work? And the mechanics of it were gorgeous, and the gathering of people was just amazingly beautiful, and how they would craft their language in the way that they talked about it and danced together was something I've never experienced before, never thought was possible, and it was beautiful and really, really funny. They're so good at humor and use it as such a grace despite the struggles, and have this, and I've learned this over the years with my dealings, because I have friends in Native circles, and they have this mentality that we're here to enjoy Earth, and that's all we're really meant to do. And they do it really, really well. And they carry that grace with them every day and all that they do. And it's so inspiring. And I remember watching the Hopi on this mesa dance and dance, and we were there for 3 days watching and being part, until off in the distance there was black sheets that you could see travel over the hills, and goosebumps would form on everyone's skin, and the skies would turn greenish, and then the rains came. And it was just, it was one of the most amazing like celebrations, you know, I've ever been privileged to be part of.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was because of the Honors College.
It sounds like this experience with this Hopi group and this Native American travel was something that was really, really impactful and has stuck with you. How did this reshape or reform the way that you think about the world as a whole, or how you perceive things?
I think the grace of the humor and experiencing the world in a way that is really about being happy and you know, we're really meant to enjoy our time here is probably the biggest takeaway. And I did learn that there on that trip, and I lost it again, kind of like I was saying before, with like kind of losing the creative spark and then really focusing on laundry and dishes and raising a family and paying the bills. You know, over the years, I've made friends in Native circles again, and go with them to practice a nipi, which is a sweat lodge ceremony. Once a month, you know, we go and do that, and it's a reminder that, yeah, we're here to, you know, practice, but with grace and humor and enjoyment. And that's that. I personally struggle to remember that, but I'm glad I have the reminders.
Yeah, those help. And you had extended your stay and extended your Weidinger scholarship for your study abroad trips.
Yep.
First going to Escora in Arizona and then heading to Copenhagen, Denmark to be a part of the Denmark International Study Program.
Right. Can
you talk a little bit about those trips?
Yeah. Let's talk about ICOSA first, even though I think that happens second. But so ICOSA is a sustainable design institute, and it was founded by Tony Brown, who was an apprentice of Paolo Soleri. Paolo Soleri is an Italian architect, came over to the US, started Arco Santi in Arizona. Arco Santi is a city that he designed from scratch and got a bunch of followers to build based on sustainable design principles. And one of his disciples, Tony, you know, grew into a professional architect and started this institute called the ICOSA, and set it up as an interdisciplinary design, you know, interdisciplinary sustainable design institute. So business majors, architecture students, graphic artists, you know, would all apply to get into the program. I was accepted, which was really great, and I'm glad I did, and got kind of a first-hand glimpse at what it took to do real projects, because all of their projects are really based in the community. You know, they're not like exercises given to architecture students. These are real, like they have implications in the town in Prescott where it was located, or surrounding universities like Emory-Riddle. Like, we work with those groups to actually design and develop real solutions to real problems that they had using architecture. And then Denmark, the DIS program, that I think, if I were to pick one thing that I got out of Ball State, it would be travel opportunities. And in particular, the Denmark program was like, I just don't even know how to tell you like how impactful that was. The professors there were just at an amazing caliber, and you know, they've really focused on how to work smarter and not harder, which I think a lot of American universities don't focus on enough, and I don't focus on enough, and need to start doing again. And they, I mean, my professor, Vibeke Larsen, my studio professor there, she was the chair of Copenhagen's Sustainable Design and Planning Board, which is amazing. Like, she was in it, right? So it was like a very real, kind of reality-based learning experience, and we studied not only the culture of Scandinavians, which is amazing in and of itself, because their priorities are really, really human-centric. And like they even have crazy words for it, like hygge, right? That whole like fad that's sweeping the U.S. as of like a couple years ago is really based in Danish or Scandinavian design, because the weather out there just is really crappy. Like it's just the worst, right? It's cold and rainy and windy like all the time. So the buildings that they generally design are somewhat nondescript on the outside, but man, you walk into the inside, and it is like an otherworldly experience, because they do hygge really, really well. And hygge is a social phenomenon for them. It is getting out of that crappy weather into a well-lit environment that's warm, cozy, with friends, and good food and drink. And again, it's like, we're here to enjoy life despite all that crap out there, you know, and they do it really, really well. And they also make sure that everyone's taken care of, right? They have a socialist government system. Everyone has a job, and there are no homeless people, very few. And if they are, they build houses for them, because housing, right, is really the primary way to get people job security. And this is like a totally separate issue, but like, you know, getting people onto a right track away from substance abuse or violence or gang, you know, affiliations. Like housing is actually the #1 factor that positively impacts all of those things, you know, and they get it right. And so their architectural and design priorities are human-centric, right, for these things, because they just do it well. Like they're really good humans. So I learned about those aspects when going to Denmark, and I learned how to use sustainable technologies in really innovative ways, which was key to my current occupation and design, you know, intentions and vision. I really, really think that any architecture or design student needs to get out into the world, right? Whether it's Denmark or somewhere else. I mean, through the architecture program, the last travel experience that I'll talk about, I took through the architecture program, it was in Southeast Asia. Went to India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and lived with students, did projects there, again, kind of based in communities, like real life problems, and understanding where, you know, they've got issues of overpopulation and resource issues and poverty that we have no experience with here. And to see their solutions from that kind of perspective really highlights the power that good design and a good design process can have in positive, impactful ways on communities. And that was really, really inspiring to me.
How much time did you spend in each of these programs?
The Southeast Asia program was a good semester, probably a little bit longer. The ECOSA was also a semester. The Denmark, actually, ECOSA could be 2 semesters, I think. I think it could be 2. Denmark can also be 2, but I did 1 as well because I split that with ECOSA. I wish I had done 2 semesters at Denmark. If I had the chance, I would go back and do that again for sure.
And which semesters did you spend abroad in these different areas?
My 3rd year was abroad or half of the 3rd year, right, was abroad in Southeast Asia. The Native American studies trip was during a summer after one of the years. I don't remember which one. It might have been after my 3rd or 4th. Probably after my 4th. And then my 5th year was here on campus. And then my 6th year, which was the extra year, that was out in Arizona with ECOSA and Denmark. Oh, I went to ECOSA first, and then I finished up in Denmark. Yeah, it was crazy, because I actually, I never walked the stage here to graduate, because I was not in the country. And they unfortunately called my name twice, 2 years in a row, and my friends called me up and told me, like, yeah, you didn't show up. Sorry.
Hard to do when you're in another country.
Yeah.
Did you carry any of these design and architectural aspects, such as the warm coziness that you experienced while you were in the Scandinavian area, or any of those aspects into your architecture in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of what people look for in good design are those human-centric aspects, and we really focus on them. Like if you like when we discuss projects with people, one, we find out what it is that they're about, right? Architecture is not about buildings. It's really about people and organizations, values, ethics. All of those things will drive a solution, that is a right fit for that particular project. What it looks like, that's the easy part. Making it warm and cozy, of course, right? Who doesn't want that? Like having access to today's technology and using, prefabricated systems or machine-based parts, like all these different components that we have access to at our fingertips that we didn't have even like a few decades ago is like overwhelming. And it's amazing too. And it's really easy to kind of fall into the technological side of building without being human-centric because of that, right? It's so like machine-based, and but we have the wherewithal to make sure, because we have a good design process, make sure to keep the human aspect in really good, strong focus as a priority when we do design work. Yeah, and that absolutely came from my time being in Denmark.
Okay. And I've also noticed a theme throughout a lot of your stories that you take into account community perception and the impact of the surrounding area or what people are thinking at the time. When did this kind of start for you?
Ooh. Probably in high school. Probably service trips in the community. I went to Appalachia as a high school student and did like construction projects there, and saw how communities really were impacted by really like shelter, right? Like that's a big thing, and knowing that I had the capacity and the ability to really craft a skill and hone that aspect of my life, to be able to offer that to communities was really, really inspiring. And I think, and it's interesting because that's translated even in the last year in my career, 2 years. Yeah, just very recently fallen into a mission for our own company, our own architecture practice that focuses on mission-driven companies. And what that means is we really like working with organizations that are out there to better the world. And so we've developed a process that helps them as an organization make decisions and prioritize their own values so that they get a design solution that is really right for what they're doing so that their missions can be enhanced, right? And they can help better the world even better now that they've got, this expansion or growth that really serves their needs and their community's needs. And that's awesome. Like that's power of design that I don't think I even realized that design had when I was going here as a student at Ball State. And I think that's one of the things that I really talk to people about in terms of what it's like to go to architecture school is it's really learning about a process, and having faith in that process is a really big deal, and to keep that process with you, throughout your years afterward and bring it into your practice, because that's what's going to make success.
With that process that you're describing and your postgraduate experience, how exactly did bringing all of those processes affect you after your graduation from Ball State?
Can you do me a favor and ask that question again?
Okay, so
In the same words, that's okay.
like when you describe those processes that you go through, and mainly your community involvement, how all of those aspects come together, and you mentioned that it's very impactful in your postgraduate experience. How exactly did that experience impact you after you graduated? What was your experience like, and how did those elements come together?
You know, at first, I don't think they did. At first, like, it was really, like, I graduated and then traveled some more. Nope, I'm wrong. That's true. They did come together. After I graduated, I was living in Copenhagen still. And then from there, traveled to Ghana for a little bit, and then came back to the States and worked on a kit of parts house that was developed or designed by an RPI professor. And I worked for an architecture firm in Troy called TAP, Troy Architecture Project. Amazing people. They're a community-based, they're a non-for-profit architecture firm. And they do historic preservation and community-based projects there in the capital region. And they do a phenomenal job for their community. And I got to see that. I got to see like all these processes that I learned in architecture school in real time with them, and then go and teach high school kids and college kids how to use power tools to build this house in South Troy, you know, for impoverished families that can't afford to hire a contractor, and so they can buy this kit of parts house and put it together themselves. And you know, that was pretty amazing. And then from there, I went to Haiti, and again, like, white kid from suburban upstate New York going down into the only country of Africans that fought for their liberty and won, right, in the colonial era. Like, that was crazy. That was insane. I mean, it was like, I've never experienced anything like that before. It was like design on the edge, like, because they had projects and community needs that were really life and death issues, right? Like, they had a flooded community that we helped design emergency relief from, and use planning skills and graphic communication skills, and had a design process that we were able to use to work with community leaders there to develop a solution that, yeah, was really about them, because they're agri-based families, right? They need a place for growing and processing, and there's not a lot of access to clean water or utilities, so designing cisterns and utility systems that were very, very tight and had a core, like there was the system design that each of these living units had, where it collected rainwater, and we sized it using pluviometric data, and it did everything. You know, it flushed toilets, it was hand washing, it was used for processing of their agricultural processes, like kind of all in one spot, instead of this mess of utilities that they usually end up with when they take an ad hoc approach to planning a project, because they don't have a design process. And so we took that process and worked with the community to get, you know, like, that utility and water system is like one example of many things, you know, out there that they have as needs, from composting to waste to incinerator burning issue, like trash issues. So, and teaching, their educational process was really, really in need of help. Like, they, as a community, we lived in Camp Perrin, you know, and they have a group there that teaches teachers how to teach using local arts in the classroom, and which was a phenomenal idea. And their pilot studies produced students that would approach adults with questions, which is unheard of in Haitian culture. Like, if you're a kid, like, you don't ask questions that your peers or your elders don't know, right? Which your elders didn't go to school, so they're not going to know anything. They're not going to know they're not going to know, like, how to add up meters and convert them to, you know, other units of measure. Like the stuff that you learn in school as a child, like, their parents didn't have access to. So it's a fear-based system in their community, and it's a fear-based system in school, because the teachers that teach only have to pass the grade that they're teaching, right? So you have people in second grade level, they pass second grade, and now they're teaching all the other second graders. And if you don't understand your lesson, or you don't have it memorized, because it's rote memorization, it's not actually learning. But if you don't have it memorized, then you got to sit on your knees for 2 hours on a concrete floor. Like, there's a lot of corporal punishment and some other serious issues that I'm not going to get into in this interview, but it's rife for, it's a terrible, their education setup is a terrible example of exactly why education is so important. Like, Haiti's issues stem a lot from how their education system is failing. And so there are groups that recognize that and have come up with solutions and different teaching models to mitigate those issues. And then, I learned through working with them that they had solutions, and then they just needed the environment to support teachers to effectively teach using those solutions. So we worked with them to develop spaces that were Haitian-based, even though I had a Western spatial construct embedded in me. Like, I would do these, three-dimensional sketches of what that's going to look like, and they'd be like, "That is not a Haitian space. That is not going to work." Which was a huge issue, because, like, here I am, like, somebody with a faith in a process that they don't have a process. They have the solution, but there's got to be, like, a process to develop the space that they need to actually tell a contractor how to build, instead of building a school that they've been using as the same model of a school for 200 years, which you can see them all throughout the country. They're the same, and they don't work. They're noisy, they're hot, they're overcrowded, nobody learns in them. Doing it differently to be able to support the teachers and what they need for this new model of teaching was really, really crucial. And I couldn't do it. I had a process that didn't work. So I had to change the process. And I knew enough about design process from my time here that it's necessary. There had to be one, but I didn't know what it was. So I actually called Anna Peterson, and one of my friends here who I met in Muncie, and she is a movement artist. She came down, we ran mock classrooms together using these solutions that the teachers were using, as arts in the classroom, worked with the groups that were teaching the teachers, and did spatial studies about how Haitians use those tools that they were developing in spaces, documented that use in different ways, and then developed the school designs based on that documentation. That landed in solutions that were actually Haitian solutions and not some white kid's idea of what they actually needed. And I think that was the most poignant example of how having faith in a process and faith in, hey, there has to be a process, and I don't know what it is, and then figuring it out to find a solution that a community actually needed.
That is awesome. So you brought up that while you were going through this process, while you were experiencing these different Haitian difficulties, you kind of called on people from back home, and you referred back to what you had learned while you were at Ball State. Mm-hmm. So how exactly did the Honors College and your architecture and design experience play into finding this solution and being able to make this work in a Haitian way for them?
Well, I think it was having the knowledge base that there is a system, right? There's a design process, right? And there are all these steps that you go through in order to craft a solution. And crafting a solution is kind of a misnomer. It's like you go through these steps, you don't know what's going to happen at the end. Like, you have to kind of, it kind of coalesces, right? It happens because you've gone through all these other steps. And if those steps are good and they're based on a real foundation of good research and documentation, then the solution it kind of shows itself. And being able to call back home upon resources that I found here in Muncie was was such a relief. Like I was stuck. Like I didn't know what to do. Like it was failing. You know, I could draw something and design stuff and they would have built it because I'm an American and Haitians listen to what white people say because they think they have all the answers. And that's just the way it is. And that's like a terrible way to think because it's gotten them into so much trouble and misappropriation of funds and just prolongs all of the things that have been bad down there and causing not only more starvation and more disruption of natural ecosystems. Like it's so rife with problems because of that mentality, right? Is that their education system is basically like, tell me what to do, instead of, hey, let's figure out a way. They don't work together. They don't cooperate because they've never really been told to, you know, and that's a generalization. And there are small groups that are getting processes and resources appropriated into the right spots, you know, and there are different non-governmental organizations that I've worked with down there to, you know, build those successes together. And I think having my background in the design profession here at Ball State was really key. Like both the critical thinking skills developed in the Honors College and also the communication skills were really great because I had to write grants, right? I run a company, it's called Leap Architecture, right? Leap was born in Haiti because I needed some statement of intent for this village relocation plan to send to George Soros to help fund it. And they, you know, I knew the directors down there, they were introduced to me, they were excited about the project, they needed something on letterhead. It was me and my best friend's father. Like I say we when we worked down there in Haiti, it was really just me and Photoshop doing like whatever I could pull together. And I didn't have letterhead. You know, I was 23 years old, like just out of college. Had never, you know, worked in firms as an internship for a few months here and there, doing sketches for different companies, and had no professional background, and except for what I learned at Ball State. And in a 15-minute conversation in the world of NGOs, where everything is an acronym, LEAP was born. And it stands for Living Environments Appropriate Projects, because living environments was what we were designing, and appropriate technology is a really big thing in the developing world, right? Like that's what you got to use because you don't have consistent electricity or power, and everything breaks in like 2 days. So that, you know, had I not gone to Ball State and their programs, I don't think those projects would have been nearly as successful as they were.
That's amazing. And you had kind of mentioned the LEAP architecture program that you had started as a result of your work in Haiti, well, at the birthplace. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and how your experience at Ball State influenced the creation of LEAP?
Yes, I'm gonna give it a shot.
Okay.
Because I think it's varied and deep, and I think most of it is really in just what I just said now. Like there's, you know, learning about how to craft a process and finding out what is appropriate for projects is really key. I mean, as an architect, like I could design anything, but I think that what's most successful is that if I leave my agenda at the front door, right? When I meet with clients, I'm really about what they're about. And the programs here through architecture learning and through honors college classes, you know, was really instrumental in that kind of mentality for me, because that education really helped prioritize for me what the world is about, you know, how to look at it in different ways, how to step into somebody else's shoes and really understand what they're about. Because if I'm providing solutions that are my agenda, it's a failed project from the get-go. Like, I need to be able to step into their shoes and then craft a process that's really appropriate for them so that they can do what they're doing better.
That's awesome. And then have you continued on with LEAP to this day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's my current firm, and I'm really excited about growing it. Up until a few years ago, I never really wanted to own or grow a company as an entity, and now, you know, I think I'm mature enough to start that process for real.
How has it grown and evolved over time?
So, you know, it started in Haiti, and I came, you know, it kind of stayed there for a while, even though I wasn't in Haiti. So I kind of left LEAP behind, you know, when I came back to the States, and met my wife, got a real job, and had kids and bought a house, you know, and it was the same thing. Like, all that kind of stuff just kind of went away and got taken over by bills, laundry, and cooking dinners and making sure the kids had what they needed, and, you know, really family-based efforts. And I worked for other architecture firms to build up my confidence and my skills, and that was really crucial, you know. And some opportunities came along years and years later where I could do some work on the side, and I had this letterhead, right? I could just say, like, okay, this is, right, I've got a, you know, some kind of a name and a title on a title block, and I'll, you know, just, it was just there, right? So I used it. And then over time, as I grew in my training, you know, from other architects in the United States, and working with contractors and on construction projects, it was amazing. I mean, there are so many good professionals, especially where I was in upstate. I worked for Mike Finney at Finney Design Group, and I worked for David Tabor, and I worked for M&W Group, and all of them were just incredible skill-building experiences that really enhanced all the foundational work that I had done here as an architecture student and an honors college student, you know. And they valued me because I could write, I could speak to people, I could formulate ideas and designs that were appropriate, and that had, and I could draw, like, I could actually communicate them, and come up with solutions, right? And that weren't necessarily like just because I thought it was neat and cool to do it this way. It was really appropriate to what the project needed to be, and these companies really valued that. And because I think there's this innate sense, you know, amongst designers and architects that they don't do what they do for themselves. It's not gratifying work. Like, it's hard, and it's long hours, and there's like hardly any money in it. You know, it is not about any of those things. For me, it's about the opportunity to design cool stuff, because it's like a brain flip, right? You can kind of live in that creative world for as long as possible. Like, it's a great fix. And then, but it's also about other people, you know, and that's like that innate sense that I think designers have, is like, well, they don't do it for themselves. They really do it because they're part of their community and they have these amazing skills that they can offer. And I remember working with M&W Group. They are a design build construction company. So they have all of their architects and engineers in-house, and they do construction of high-tech facilities, like clean room facilities for the biofarm market, or for microchip fabrication plants, which, you know, they're full of nasty chemicals and use like tons and tons of water, and are huge buildings, very dangerous for humans to be in. And working on those projects gave me the confidence to go out on my own, because I got to learn how to put a building together in like that environment, probably better in 6 months with them than I did in like 10 years working with firms that did other types of work. And at the time, my wife was actually looking for her residency spot, and we got, she got selected, matched, right, in the residency match to go to Philly, which we ended up not going there. But that was when we found out I cut my ties with M&W, and running my own company was probably the only way we were going to support us as a family through that transition and move with any kind of smooth way, because I needed a flexible job because I was still primary caretaker of the kids while Claire was going to be full-time, like 80-hour weeks in residency doing it. And so I pulled out that letterhead and cut the umbilical with M&W and started Leap Architecture for real.
That is awesome. So you began to mention Claire and your family life, and earlier you had mentioned that you met your wife through Capoeira.
Yeah.
I believe. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for me?
I did. All right, let me think about this for a minute, because that came a little bit later. She and I met at one of my sister's parties. Like I think it was just after New Year's, or between Christmas and New Year's. And I was there. I was kind of in between travels. I had just come back from Haiti and was on my way to Tucson, Arizona. So I was in New York, and in a couple weeks or months or something, I was going to move and go to Tucson, Arizona to help my buddy that I'd met in Copenhagen, actually. He was going to build his thesis project in his parents' backyard out in Tucson, which was like this sweet little design studio out of rammed earth and like welded metal water catchment systems, and it was amazing. And I was so excited about it. And I was at this party at my sister's place, and Claire walks into the room, and it was over. Like, it was love at first sight. And we were talking to each other, and I don't talk to girls. Like, that's just not my thing. Like, I am wicked shy. And she was totally out of my league. And we talked. I must have talked for like 30 minutes straight. And she was just like smiling and nodding. And she was later telling me that she was not listening to a word I said, and was like in this haze of awe, which, so we were both just like standing in this doorway while other people were like weaving in and out trying to get by, totally oblivious to our surroundings. I remember that moment very, very well. And it's something I treasure and think about often. And come to find out at the end of the conversation, she's also moving to Tucson, Arizona. And so we were talking about, lives, and she, we got to know each other a little bit through doing stuff like meeting up with some friends at first, and then me calling and being like, hey, there's this thing called Capoeira that we're going to go do. Do you want to go and check it out? And, we can learn how to do this. And she did. So that was one of the, so I used Capoeira as an excuse to hang out with her more often because I didn't have any other ideas. But yeah, she was totally sold. We ended up driving out to Tucson together and, trying to work that out there. Ultimately moved back upstate New York. And, she had a 5.5-year-old boy who was amazing. And we, built a family from there, and still have a family together with growing kids, which are all like phenomenal and taking advantage of the New York City environment, like full tilt. Like our 6-year-old is so excited that there are like whole stores that sell nothing but chocolate.
That's amazing. You mentioned that you met her after you had gotten back from Haiti while you were at your sister's house. What year was that, if you remember?
2003-ish, 2004 maybe.
Right. And then how was that transition into family life like for you?
Oh my God, it was miserable. I had been a vagabond, right, traveling on my own as a bachelor forever, and then here she is with, you know, a 5.5-year-old, 6-year-old son at that time, and you know, we're trying to, you know, figure out what it is that we are, and living in Tucson in kind of a foreign environment. We had the time to go across the country together, you know, in the car and visit all these places. Like we stopped at Zion and like other like Canyonlands. Like it was an amazing trip, and then spent time in Tucson. And she had kind of a like there's definitely some personal history, and it's long and deep. But her former partners. Her former partner is his son. He actually passed away when her son was fairly young, and you know, was kind of out of the picture early on. You know, as soon as Casey, that's his name, was born, he passed away a few years later, and his mother was the one in Tucson, which is why Claire was going to kind of like build a family with the three of them with that kind of support. And I was going, you know, for different reasons, to build a career and do, you know, some construction, get that under my belt, and then ultimately I found a job at an architecture firm back, you know, in upstate, and we ended up, you know, all moving back together. So yeah, that was kind of like, we, you know, both of our families from upstate, so we had that, like, we had that support system, you know, that really mattered when we were both so young, pursuing careers, trying to raise kids and, like, you know, be adults.
You had mentioned that she was going through a residency program as well, and looking into residency programs later on. With you being affiliated with architecture and her being in the medicinal world, what did that comparison or like everyday life look like for you with a family?
Oh yeah, right. It was miserable. That's right. Okay, so that, yeah. So back to that point, like it was really hard. I mean, getting through the medical training itself, like it's ridiculous. What the one thing they tell you is, you know, don't have a family, you know, and the 5 myths of being an architect, like don't ever have kids, you better marry rich, live in a big metro area, and you're gonna, you know, basically don't expect any money, and you're gonna work like 80-hour weeks, which I did none of those things except for work 80-hour weeks, right? And so did she, and it was not good. I was depressed. I had been traveling like as a single person. Now I'm like a father with responsibilities on more than one occasion. You know, Claire had to take me aside and like really like drill into me, like I need more out of you, and I transformed. You know, like I really had to think about things differently, and shift my priorities around, spend time doing things that I wouldn't have spent time doing them otherwise, and like showing up on time was really like the really basic stuff that I had to be responsible for other people's schedules, and it was depressing, you know. And Claire is a problem solver. You know, she won't let something that is not fitting last. And she was just like, hey, you know, we're not gonna keep on doing this. Something's gotta change. My parents used to play volleyball, and like they did something, we need something together. Let's go play volleyball, and at the YMCA at least. And I was like, I'd played volleyball in high school. I was like, I am not going to play that stupid sport again. And even though I really liked it, and I also had played really competitively, and I'm definitely not going to go to the YMCA to play like backyard ball. Like we play like for real. Like I play with guys that go up and hit the ball, and the ball bounces off the gym floor and hits the ceiling. Like it's real. And finally, you know, we started playing volleyball together, but I was not going into the low level stuff where beginners should usually start. And Claire learned how to pass on her knees in our living room floor while there's still snow on the ground outside. And then we started playing like very high level tournaments that we lost together all the time that summer, but it was wicked fun. And that, you know, gave me the spark back in my life again, you know, like that relief from the misery of laundry and dishes and weekends full of chores instead of like all the cool creative stuff that I really like to be doing. Yeah, and we've so back and forth, you know, she's got an amazing career that she's building still, and as do I, like building a business together, and it is still hard. And there are times when it's miserable. And now, but we have tools, right? We have help, and we have support, and we have activities and things that we can go do outside of our lives to remember and practice those things that, hey, yeah, we're here on this planet to enjoy it. Like, that's number one. Let's go do that.
It sounds like through all the struggle, you two have really found a way to come together and really overcome a lot of those obstacles, which I think is amazing.
It's been a trip.
And as you've had time to reflect on your experiences through Ball State, through your career, and just as you've been traveling, as we wrap up today, is there any additional information or stories that you would like to share today about your honors college experience or your experience at Ball State in general?
Maybe not my own experience, but I would say that I can't iterate enough to students here at Ball State to get out of Ball State. Like Ball State has these amazing doors that are gateways to other experiences that you don't get here on campus. And to be part of the Ball State community means really being part of the larger world and get out and experience it, because that's what's gonna make you a better human.
With that, we will be concluding our interview today. Thank you, Eric, for taking the time to share your stories with me today for the Ball State University Honors College Oral History Project. And it was a great pleasure to learn more about you and your experience.
Great. Thanks so much, Erica.